I want to start today with a ghost story,
Oh, okay.
but not the kind with, haunted houses or anything. This is a ghost story about a sound.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah. And to really get it, I need you and the listener, too, to just transport yourself back to October 7th, 1992.
All right, set the scene for us. Where exactly are we?
We are in a really small village in Turkey. There's an old man there. His name is Tefik Enesans, and he knows he is dying.
Okay.
He's frail. He's in bed. But he does something very specific before he goes. He invites a linguist to his bedside. He turns on a tape recorder, and he just starts talking.
Just talking.
Yeah, he tells stories. He recites old proverbs. He even sings some old songs.
And he's speaking Ubikh.
Exactly. Ubikh. It's this incredibly distinct language from the Western Caucasus.
It's famous among linguists, right?
Oh, yeah, because it was basically just a wall of sound. It had something like 84 consonants.
Wow.
And only 2 vowels. So it sounded almost like, I don't know, the wind crashing against stones.
Yeah.
But here is the haunting part about that day. Tevik wasn't just a speaker.
He was the last one.
The very last one. So when that tape recorder finally clicked off,
The language vanished.
it didn't just fade, it was gone. He was buried knowing that no human being would ever again hear that language spoken by someone who learned it from their mother.
Just a total final silence.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful image to start with because it forces us to look at the end of things. But looking at the sources for today's deep dive, we aren't really here to talk about linguistics.
No, we're not. We're here to talk about how things end.
Right.
The source material we have today is diving into the second part of a specific masterclass series. The title of this section is To Exist is to Resist.
But our mission today is to look at the inverse of that.
Exactly. What happens when the resistance just stops?
The sources draw this really sharp and frankly uncomfortable line between a resistance that is violently crushed in battle and a resistance that simply fades away.
Right. So for everyone listening, what we are going to do today is unpack a concept that is honestly pretty heavy. We are going to explore the mechanism of assimilation.
Why people choose to stop resisting.
Yes. Why they choose to collaborate. And we are going to end on a very difficult historical case study from 1938 in Palestine involving something called the peace bands.
This is the kind of stuff that usually gets left out of the history books.
Because it's not about heroes and villains.
No, it's about people making choices that seem highly rational at the time, even smart, but they end in absolute tragedy.
Right. We tend to think of colonialism or conquest as purely kinetic,
Guns, walls, soldiers kicking down doors.
But the sources argue that the most effective erasure is actually seductive. It is about what they call restructuring desire.
Restructuring desire.
Yeah.
It sounds like a phrase out of a corporate marketing textbook, not a history of war.
Well, in a way, it is marketing. It's the process of convincing a population that the only way to have any dignity or safety or just a future for their kids is to stop being who they are.
And start becoming like the people in power.
Right. It's not just forcing them to change with a gun to their head. It's making them want to change.
There is a classic, devastating example of this in the U.S. with the Native American boarding schools.
I was just thinking about that. Richard Pratt, the founder of that system.
His whole doctrine was, kill the Indians, save the man.
It chills you to the bone. But the sources ask us to do something really challenging here. They ask us to look at this from the perspective of an indigenous parent in, say, the year 1900.
Which is hard to do.
It is. Because your first thought is, how could a parent ever agree to send their kid to a place with that motto?
That's the trap, though. And the source makes it clear we shouldn't judge this from the comfort of where we sit today.
Right.
If you are that parent and you look around and see that your child will literally starve or be hunted or be an absolute outcast if they stay within their traditional culture.
Yeah.
But they might actually become a lawyer or a doctor if they learn English, cut their hair, and put on a suit. What do?
You choose the suit. You choose survival.
You make a highly rational choice based entirely on love. You're trying to save your kid.
But here is the massive takeaway from the text. An individual act of survival can become a collective act of suicide.
Precisely. If one parent does it, it's survival. If the whole generation does it, the culture experiences a civilizational death.
It disappears without a single shot being fired. It's the Ubikh trajectory. It just quietly flatlines because everyone was just trying to be practical.
And this is the glimmer of hope the sources provide before we get back to the heavier history. That flatline isn't inevitable.
Right. The Maori example in New Zealand. I loved this part of the reading.
It's incredible.
So in the 1970s, the Maori language, Te Reo Maori, was basically on death's door. The sources say there were fewer than 70,000 speakers left.
And they were mostly elderly. It was following the exact same path as Ubikh. Statistical models said it would be gone by the year 2000.
But it's not.
No, it's very much alive. Because activists looked at that math and said, we reject this outcome.
They organized.
Yes, they created these things called language nests. They were basically immersion preschools where the grandparents taught the toddlers directly.
Skipping the middle generation entirely if they had to.
Exactly. They made it a political project to refuse the silence.
And the result is undeniable. The source mentions this teenage heavy metal band, Alien Weaponry. Have you heard them?
I actually pulled them up after reading the packet. They are intense.
So intense. And they hit #1 on the New Zealand charts back in 2022, screaming in Maori.
About colonization, no less.
Yeah.
And that right there is the key takeaway. The difference between a language that dies and a language that survives isn't luck, it's organization.
It is the active refusal to be seduced by the idea that assimilation equals progress.
Exactly. So that's the success story. That is the resistance winning against the silence. But we have to look at the other side of the coin now.
The side where people take the deal.
The source material spends a lot of time on this concept. They call it the logic of collaboration.
And this is where we have to ask you, the listener, to suspend your judgment for a minute. Because history usually paints collaborators as just pure traitors.
Villains rubbing their hands together.
Right. But usually, in their own heads, they are the pragmatists. They see themselves as the adults in the room, trying to save their people from total annihilation.
They are just doing the math.
Doing the math. They look at the imperial power, whether it's the Spanish Empire or the British Empire, and they say, fighting this is suicide.
We need to negotiate. We need to find a way to fit in.
The sources bring up the Taino people in the Caribbean. When the Spanish arrived in places like Hispaniola and Cuba, some of the leaders, the caciques, they fought back.
But others tried to cut deals.
Right. They gave the Spanish labor. They gave them intelligence on other indigenous groups. Their logic was, if we make ourselves useful, they won't destroy us.
And the tragedy is in the result. The Spanish weren't looking for partners.
No.
They were looking for pure extraction. Gold, sugar, labor. The cooperators were consumed just as fast as the resistors.
The collaboration basically bought them nothing.
It's like the Native American scouts in the American West. The text notes how Apache, Crow, and Pawnee Scouts were used by the U.S. Army to track down other indigenous groups.
Driven by old tribal rivalries, maybe?
Sure, but also driven by that desperate hope that an alliance would protect their specific tribe.
If we help the army will let us keep our land.
But once their usefulness ended, once the so-called hostiles were defeated, the scouts lost their land and rights just like everyone else.
The alliance purchased absolutely nothing.
The colonizer does not have friends, they have interests.
There is one more historical example before we get to Palestine that I think really drives this failed pragmatism home. The Irish Parliamentary Party.
This is a fascinating case study in political realism failing completely.
Right, because this wasn't ancient history. This was 20th century politics.
So, early 1900s, John Redmond is the leader. He's a constitutional nationalist. He wants Ireland free, but he wants to do it strictly by the book.
Through the British Parliament.
No violence, no revolution. So when World War I starts, he makes a huge gamble.
He encourages Irish men to enlist in the British Army.
Yes. He tells them to go fight and die for Britain. His logic is, if we shed our blood for the Empire will owe us. They will reward our loyalty with home rule.
I mean, it sounds logical. It sounds like the grown-up strategy.
Right.
Let's prove we're worthy.
It is entirely logical, but it was completely wrong. Because while Redmond is playing politics, the 1916 Easter Rising happens.
A group of rebels seizes buildings in Dublin.
Right. And initially, the Irish public actually hated the rebels. They thought they were ruining Redmond's smart strategy.
But then the British responded.
The British responded with overwhelming, gratuitous brutality. And it flipped the entire script. The source highlights one specific detail here regarding James Connolly.
He was one of their rebel leaders.
Yes, and he was very badly wounded in the fighting. His leg was shattered. He was dying of gangrene. He couldn't even stand up.
So a pragmatic empire might have shown mercy, or at least waited until he was healthy enough to stand for his execution.
Instead, the British strapped him to a chair, just so they could shoot him.
That is gruesome.
That image strapping a dying man to a chair, just to execute him, it completely destroyed the argument for collaboration.
It proved you can't negotiate with a power that treats you like that.
Exactly. It shifted the entire Irish public from accommodation to resistance.
Which brings us to the core case study of this deep dive, the Arab Revolt in Palestine.
Right, from 1936 to 1939.
I have to admit, I didn't know much about this specific internal conflict before reading the sources. The peace bands.
Sallam.
That sounds so benign. Peace bands. It sounds like a community outreach group.
But the reality was incredibly dark. To understand this, we need to set the scene. The Arab Revolt was a massive uprising against British rule and Zionist settlement.
A nationwide general strike and armed rebellion.
Yes, but Palestinian society was not a monolith. You had the nationalists, led largely by the Husseini clan, and you had their rivals, the Nashashibi clan.
And the Nashashibis considered themselves the pragmatists, the realists.
Right. They looked at the revolt, they saw the British military might, the economic devastation, and they said, this is madness. We can't win this way.
So in 1938, Fakhri al-Nashashibi organizes these peace bands.
And what they were Palestinian militias. But they weren't fighting the British, they were working with the British.
Hunting down Palestinian rebels.
Yes, manning checkpoints, providing intelligence, conducting raids on villages. It caused a civil war within the revolt.
And the British must have loved it.
They absolutely did. The source material points out a huge revelation here about the funding. These bands were funded by the British military, sure, but they were also funded by the Jewish agency.
Wait, the Zionist leadership was funding Palestinian militias.
From their perspective, it made perfect strategic sense. If the Palestinians are busy killing each other, they are too fractured to resist the settlement project.
That is a devastating detail.
Yeah.
And there's a specific word used in the British records to describe these peace bands that the text emphasizes.
Yes, the British didn't refer to them as allies.
They called them assets.
Assets. That distinction is everything.
An ally is a partner.
Right, someone you share a mutual future with. An asset is a tool. You use a tool until it breaks or the job is done, and then you discard it.
And the cost of being an asset was staggering.
The sources estimate around 1,200 Palestinians were killed in this internal violence.
That is a massive number for the population size at the time.
It broke the back of the revolt. The uprising collapsed in 1939 not just because of British force, but because this internal fracture left the society exhausted.
So what happened to the Nashashibis? Did their realism save them?
Not at all. Fakhri al-Nashashibi was assassinated in Baghdad in 1941. The family was politically sidelined for decades.
The collaboration bought them nothing.
Worse than nothing. The expert analysis in the text connects this directly to 1948.
The Nakba.
Yes. The peace bands didn't cause the Nakba, but the fragmentation they caused left Palestinian society incredibly weak. When the existential crisis of partition and war hit a decade later, they lacked the cohesion to resist effectively.
So if we zoom out and look at all these sources together, what is the ultimate lesson? Because it is so easy for us, sitting here today, to judge these people.
Who call them cowards.
Right, but they were under immense pressure.
The source synthesizes this into what it calls the analytical error of the collaborator.
Analytical error.
The mistake isn't moral weakness. The mistake is confusing a tactical accommodation for a genuine relationship.
They assume the colonizer actually cares about their survival.
Exactly. They think, if I play by the rules will protect me. But the colonizer's structural interest isn't your safety. It is their control.
Which brings us back to the title of the masterclass section. To exist is to resist. And this core concept of sumud.
Sumud. Steadfastness.
Holding your ground.
Yeah.
The text uses a really powerful physical reality to contrast with the peace bands. The keys.
The iron keys.
If you've looked into this topic at all, you've probably seen the photos. Palestinian families who still hold these big old-fashioned iron keys to homes in villages that were destroyed in 1948.
Passed down from grandparent to child.
Now, if you apply the pragmatist logic, the Nashashibi logic, to those keys.
The realist would say, the house is gone. The village is literally not on the map anymore. Holding a key to a door that doesn't exist is irrational.
They would say, throw the key away and accept reality.
But history views it very differently. The peace bands tried to be hyper-realistic. They accepted the power dynamics, and the source notes they are remembered with shame.
While the people holding the keys,
the people who insist on the unrealistic idea that their history is real, that they have a right to exist exactly as they are the ones preserving the identity.
They're keeping the culture from becoming Ubikh.
Exactly. The key is a physical object that insists a reality existed and was not legitimately erased.
So in a system that demands your disappearance, just staying there, just existing, is the ultimate act of resistance.
But the sources also ask us for a bit of grace here at the end.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we are not saying these historical collaborators were just monsters.
No. They were human beings, terrified human beings trying to survive. When you are offered a hand that says peace, it is very natural to want to take it.
The goal of this deep dive isn't just to condemn them. It's to understand their error so we don't repeat it in our own lives.
The real lesson is to ask the right questions when someone demands you be pragmatic.
You have to ask, whose definition of peace is this?
And who benefits from my acceptance of it?
If the peace requires you to stop being who you are, it's not peace. It's just a quieter form of erasure.
The source ends with a proverb. It's originally Nahuatl from Mexico, but it's used globally now.
They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds.
It perfectly captures the idea. The attempt to crush something can actually be the exact thing that ensures it goes back.
But only if you refuse to disappear.
Right.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over today. We've talked about historical empires and grand conflicts, but think about the systems you interact with every day.
Your workplace, your community, your institutions.
Right. What are the invisible ways you are being asked to assimilate right now? What pieces of your own identity or your own values are you quietly trading away just to feel safe or to be seen as pragmatic?
Are you being treated as an ally or an asset?
It's a heavy question.
Mm-hmm.
But staying aware of that difference is how you survive. Stay awake, everyone,